Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Breaking Down the Walls in Government DevOps Initiatives, brought to you by i360Gov and Software AG Government Solutions. Our speakers slash presenters today are Sarah Fodden, Identity, Records, and National Security Delivery Division Chief within DHS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. We also have Dustin Lown, Senior Advisor, Technology and Innovation for the Federal Communications Commission, and Chris Borneman, Chief Technology Officer with Software AG Government Solutions. Quickly before we get started, I just want to go over a few quick housekeeping items. At any time during the webinar, if you'd like to submit a question, just look for the Ask a Question button in the console. We'll have a Q&A session at the end after all the presentations. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, click on the Help button that's located below the slide window. You can also refresh your screen by pressing the F5 button on your PC or Command R on your Mac. And then finally, I want to let everyone know that today's webinar is being recorded so that you can watch it again later if you'd like, or you can share it with a colleague. And now I'd like to turn it over to our first speaker, Sarah Fodden, Identity, Records, and National Security Delivery Division Chief. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. So yes, I am Sarah Fodden, and I formerly managed the verification program and now manage that program in addition to several others that are a part of a larger division. But I'm going to mainly talk about the verification program for this webinar because I think it is most applicable to the topic. So the verification program includes two main systems. One is the E-Verify program, which is employment verification for businesses. It is currently mandatory in only 6 states, but it has been discussed in lots of the presidential debates in terms of making it mandatory for all businesses within the United States. And what that program does, what that application does, is verify employment eligibility based on citizenship status for all of these businesses. The SAVE program does a very similar function, only it verifies benefit eligibility for federal, state, and local benefits granting organizations. And basically what that does is, obviously, so for example, SSA for Social Security benefits, or Health and Human Services for Affordable Care Act, or welfare. These benefit granting organizations would utilize the application in order to verify eligibility status based on immigration status, for these benefits. So around 2 years ago, I was asked to come over and manage this program and help help modernize it, basically. It was a very legacy application with a back-end Oracle database that had all of the business logic within the database itself. And they were trying to get through the processes in order to become a modernization program, which included reams and reams of paper describing how we were going to do it and what it was going to cost us. And I'm really literally talking about a stack of paper that is about up to my hip that had been documented for this. And so my first task was to help get us through that process really quickly, which we did. And by September of 2015, we were approved as a Level 1 modernization program. And we started to modernize the system in AWS using completely agile processes and methodologies and a full-on DevOps approach, automating our entire infrastructure and architecture for all of the modernization pieces. By December of that same year, so that's 3 months later, we had our first piece of the application live and running with production data and production users in AWS. We decided to utilize mainly a strangler approach where we rip off pieces of the legacy application and rebuild it in the cloud. And like I said, utilizing a full DevOps agile approach. So the next slide, our focus and the way that we manage our business from the IT side is by making the business priorities and providing immediate business value a whole, like an integral part of our methodology. So we have live business users that act as testers, but they don't test like a tester does. We toggle on features for them, and then they test them live in production. And our DevOps focus and architecture allows us to do it that way very quickly. For this program, this slide indicates what our goals were for the program. So it was improving the performance, monitoring and compliance capabilities, the manual verification process, the automated verification process, and customer service. And so we've been focusing primarily on those 5 goals. And when we go to the ARB, which is our acquisition review board that DHS requires us to go to, this is what we focus on instead of the typical waterfall cost schedule performance approach. Not to say we don't talk about budget and costs. And in fact, we've saved significant amounts of money by doing it this way. So again, our approach has been highly customer focused. We have dedicated UX designers for each project. So if we have a feature or a functionality, for example, when employers enroll to use our program, there's a website that they use. So we call that the enrollment process. So that would be considered like one feature. And then once they are enrolled, case processing would be like a second feature. Each project has its own dedicated product owner and UX designer that helps us to develop the new product in a way that really is efficient and streamlined for the business and the customers. As I said previously, we use toggles to turn features on and off. And we recently achieved continuous deployment. Well, actually, it's been about 9 months now. So we're now deploying to production numerous times a day. Let's see. Go to the next slide. I already talked about customer experience. So when we talk about our architecture, the key focus has always been on automation of every piece of it. We're using Docker containers at this point so that we can ensure reliability for the application itself and the images of it, which has saved us a significant amount of money, not only money, but just time and energy, and ensures that our different stacks are exactly the same. So our prod stack is exactly the same as our pre-prod stack, et cetera, and down the line. And also has helped us to really implement a more secure approach to how we manage the images themselves, and it makes it extremely repeatable. So that's how we've done that. The next slide is just, kind of a high-level overview of the modernization in the cloud and what that looks like for us. So the results are that we have been able to roll out this application or pieces of this application really quickly to our business and implement tons of business value right away. And we track that by using metrics, which we capture at the beginning to baseline the program, and then we capture how much we're improving over time. Our environment is incredibly highly available. We have 0 downtime releases, and at this point we've even moved the legacy stuff into AWS as well, and we've automated quite a bit of that as well as we continue to rip it apart. It just made sense to do it so that we could be on similar release cycles between the legacy teams and the modernization teams, because as we modernize and rip pieces off, we still have to refactor the legacy application at the same time. And so we wanted to be able to release both of the changes at the same time or on the same timetable. So, and then technical bugs or any of those issues are fixed immediately. We have immediate user feedback because we have users testing it from the field. And so sometimes if they let us know that there's a little bug or some kind of little issue, it's fixed within the same day. And we have a great trust relationship with the business. They're very happy about these approaches and are now implementing agile processes within their business functions as well. We're actually at a point where we don't even really talk about agile anymore that much. It's just that's not really a conversation that we're having. We're more focused on just DevOps and more modern technologies like Kafka and big data and things that we're looking at down the line for the future. So that's about all I have, John. I'm assuming that there's going to be some questions on how we got here.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Sarah. Our next speaker is Dustin Lown, Senior Advisor, Technology and Innovation for the Federal Communications Commission. Hello, Dustin.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me. Sarah, great job. I'm Dustin Lown, Contractor Senior Advisor of Technology for the FCC. Sarah and I have had some great conversations on collaboration around DevOps. We've kind of taken a couple different approaches, but I think the beautiful, aspect of these conversations is I don't think there's a one size fits all. You kind of have to do what you want to do for your business. So why am I here? A few years ago, I was asked by the CIO of the Federal Communications Commission to help in his modernization efforts. They asked me to take on one of their first projects, which was their Consumer Complaint Center. Approximately 500,000 citizens a year can complain to the FCC on one-to-many reasons, cable bills, whatever you see on TV. They had a quote for $3.2 million. We chose to buy an off-the-shelf service called Zendesk to modernize the system with. We were able to do procurement to launch in less than 60 days. We saved about $2.some million and got a fair amount of awards, so it was pretty cool. But that kind of set off the model where we were able to enable the business versus having IT control things. So, a few years later, the business is off and running with this application still, and IT's out of the process for the most part. What did our technology look pre-cloud? And we're still doing the modernization effort, but there's approximately 207 legacy systems, not a clear defined approach on methodology, kind of contractor-owned methodology versus the FCC owning it internally as far as their development ops. So a lot of moving parts, and we had to come up with a model to try and streamline that to make it more efficient. So I think the first thing everybody should ask prior to kind of embarking on these journeys, let's call it modernization, is what is DevOps to us? I would say if it's your agency or your department or whatever, what is it to you? Thus, we're really just trying to expedite the process in which we're able to deliver services to internal and external stakeholders. And we also, we wanted to remove software development from the equation because it's often costly and it's hard to keep up with. And it's also skill set dependent. So we took that approach to it. Why are we doing this? There's many different reasons you're going to go into DevOps. I think, and specifically in federal, with all the legacy applications, if everybody doesn't move forward quickly with a new methodology and on modern stacks, et cetera, you're going to get left behind, and you might not be supportable, or you're not going to be able to support your agency very well. So there's a lot of different reasons. Internally, the FCC. One of the reasons there was a disparate group of contractors working together. Part of the efforts of modernizing your development operations is to bring those contractors together, all have them working as one, as well as the internal staff. So no one's ever seen as independent of each other. That's one of the reasons. Who needs to be involved? I think, from back in the day, we'd have an IT-based approach for DevOps. Currently, Sarah had hit upon this, everyone needs to be involved from start to finish because there's going to be a big change management effort. And if you're going to move from your slow model, which it took 6 months to 2 years to roll out an application, you couldn't even get features, it was really expensive, to, hey, we're going to move extremely quickly. We're going to have things up and moving. It might not be perfect from the beginning, but we're going to give you a chance to repeat that or remediate quickly, and we're going to be able to add features daily. So going into that model, your whole organization needs to be aware of what you're doing. There's going to be a little shock. And when I say everyone involved, it doesn't mean everyone needs a decision necessarily as you're moving forward with modernizing your applications. How do we do DevOps? So the FCC picked an interesting model. So we call it the 80-15-5 model. We chose a platform as a service which you purchased called ServiceNow. They have a development module in which you can develop applications really quickly. 15%, if that doesn't do it, there's off-the-shelf products we can buy to solve it. 5% custom build. So the electronic comment filing system was a custom build application we did on the AWS stack. And why we do that is when we're able to pick some of these COTS solution, call it platform as a service, we're able to move really quickly. There's no infrastructure operations to think about, which lessens your load and time to delivery in a lot of instances. And you're putting the burden on the vendor who has dedicated focus to certain aspects. And a lot of times for us, I know Sarah has a different approach too. The ATO process on one platform is a lot easier depending on your security department and their ability to understand, kind of what's happening there. So that's kind of how we do DevOps. One of the biggest things after 3 years of kind of working inside government, I came from the commercial world, so I didn't really have federal experience. Is I think the more everybody is educating themselves, I think a lot of us think we know. Even the term DevOps can mean one to many things. Go out there, research what all these terms mean. Research the various methodologies and ways they can be accomplished, come together as a team, come have a consensus of what you're trying to accomplish as a group prior to implementing anything, and then take some of these modern techniques. The great thing about either buying off the shelf or Sarah's approach is you can make mistakes, you make them quickly, and you can change. It's not a lot of cost or effort if you do that like the past. So really just educating yourself on what's happening in the modern day world with some of these technologies is going to get you a long way. So that's what I have.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dustin. Our next speaker is Chris Borneman. Chris is the Chief Technology Officer with Software AG Government Solutions. Welcome, Chris.
Welcome. Thank you. So, as John mentioned, I'm Chris Borneman. My background has operated as a CTO, CIO, and for a while also as an operations officer, all around technology. Over 12 or so, 13 years has been aerospace and defense, most recently more in the federal space, but prior was more on just the defense and not so much on the civilian side. Today, what I wanted to do was to get into what is DevOps is kind of the theme. Everyone needs kind of to understand and internalize what does it mean to them. And for us, when we look at DevOps, part of the drivers off of that is continuous process. And so when we look at our standard development, build, test, staging, production, for us to really achieve DevOps, in our definition, we look at how do you do development, and have you shifted off of a waterfall approach into an agile? Have you been able to move into your integration side, and then ultimately into your delivery? But it doesn't ultimately stop there. You need to look at, from a DevOps perspective, how do you manage your production environment? So how do you gain your insights? A lot of your modern architectures, Sarah's talked about moving into AWS. So how do you handle scale? If you have high needs and high scale, how do you scale it up? But then how do you bring it back down? DevOps needs to look at every aspect from your life cycle, from the initial creation all the way to deployment and then management within that. But it also approaches things not just from these technology standpoints, but also from a team perspective, which is where a lot of our customers have provided us a lot of insight, a lot of feedback that we'll talk about here in just the next couple of slides. So it relates ultimately into a maturity model. So no one gets up in the morning and says, you know what, we're going to do DevOps, and then quick plan and you're going to deploy it and everything's magical. Is that really it turns into progression, right? You kind of at your level 0 is you haven't started anything, but as soon as you decide to do something, you start getting into that first stage, which is looking at your cultural. And so when we've spoken with customers that have wanted to pursue or have started pursuing DevOps, cultural changes have really come into play very, very early on, and understanding how are they approaching their coding, how are they approaching their testing, and starting to find out their roles and responsibilities. A lot of our customers, especially on the government side, have one or more systems integrators or subcontractors that are engaged in their processes. And once they've moved past that, then they start getting into more of a DevOps, what we call DevOps fundamental, is looking at the actual integration and working through those cross-functional teams. And so one of the things that has been a little bit of a challenge as they start looking more of a teaming towards DevOps is historically they may have had separate roles. They may have had one contract, either a different agency or another SI manages their production environment. Possibly another one is doing their development. And then maybe a different contract is defined around just the testing aspects of the solution. And so when we start embracing a DevOps approach, you need to work through those roles and responsibilities. You may have to revisit your contracts and how you measure the SI for their performance, because it's going to change from the way you've done in the past. You know, sometimes we've had customers who said that they use an agile waterfall approach, right? So it's kind of like this hybrid that ultimately needs to change. They really need to look at what is DevOps, what are their drivers, and then ultimately how do they change that? And even internally within their agency, how do their internal roles change to more product owners and product focus, and start discussing minimum viable product and different feature sets and different owners. And Sarah used a lot of great terms in her presentation of where they had ownerships and releasing new products. And it's that mentality that comes through from groups that have addressed DevOps and addressed some of those challenges that they need to work through. If everything's going well, they start getting into manage, is that they've worked through the integrated tool chain. They're able to really focus on that continuous delivery. And then ultimately they'll progress into optimization, right? So now I'm doing my DevOps, I'm deployed, and now I can look at how do I go through and tweak it, how do I manage my environment and production most effectively, but I can really be optimizing my DevOps. And it's that whole progression when we talk about DevOps that organizations need to look at. Now, the next stage is to figure out where would you apply DevOps. And by no means would I be an advocate that DevOps is something that you apply across the board when you say, hey, I'm going to do DevOps and I get this hierarchy of progression for maturity and we'll just do that across the board. And reality is that you still have legacy teams and you might have some DevOps teams and you might have other types of teams that Dustin alluded to, which I'll talk a little bit about in the presentation today. What Gartner did a good job for us is that Gartner has gone through and they set out to do 7 steps to start your DevOps initiative. And they categorize systems into 3 major buckets. Your systems of record, right? So our ERP systems, our financial systems, systems of differentiation. Where do we start having some variability of my agency versus another agency? But we all track our budgets, right? And then systems of innovation. Where am I really providing my unique value? In my agency, in my charter. And if I look at how I approach that, Gartner looked at it from 2 modes. And they did it as you start looking at from a governance and a change level. So systems of records that had high governance around it probably also have a slower rate of change versus systems of innovations have less governance and a higher rate of change. Is that when I look at mode 1, where a lot of things will gather around my systems of record, is really our traditional types of projects, right? And those are emphasized around safety, they're emphasized around accuracy, and then I'll have less projects that probably work best in that model as they go from to differentiation or systems innovation. That model may not work the best for trying to be innovative. Conversely, they define mode 2 is really looking at the exploratory. And that's emphasizing more around agility and speed. So it's going to have a high rate of change. It's going to have probably a lot less governance or a different type of governance, different type of processes. It's probably not used substantially for systems of record, but it may have components to it and definitely may interact with those types of systems. And so between those 2 modes, Gartner has suggested that if you don't look for opportunities for DevOps, start up there with those systems of innovation. That's where you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. It also is a lower risk, right? You're not changing systems of record that you have a higher degree of audit requirements around, et cetera. Is that start there, cut your teeth through it, work through the processes, and then you expand out from that. But by no means would I also advocate that everything of Mode 2 should be DevOps. Those are just candidates for DevOps. So when we look at our platforms, there's a variety of different approaches. Some things may be high process automation, high integration, and those are systems that don't require a lot of human interaction for, or if they do, it's very structured. As like an order to cash is an example here, where most of the time we know how to do those processes, but maybe there's exception basis things that will fall out, and my change rate for that may not be quite as high. The other extreme is we get a lot of interest from our customers on the government side for case management, where they have things that maybe they're doing by paper, they're doing by email, they're doing it a couple different legacy systems that maybe aren't quite meeting their needs, and they want to automate that. But when you look at that, it's more of a citizen developer approach. You want to remove IT from it. They want to be able to go through and do the more of a forms or a smart forms approach, but a better way of collecting and workflow and processing it that may not be as heavy from an IT perspective, is they want to support those. But those may not be true DevOps, but they still are that Mode 2, where I want to be highly innovative. I want to get results very quickly. I want to be able to learn, adapt. I want to fail quickly if that's the right way, or change it and enhance it so I get success. And then obviously you have some overlap in there where you have a little more workflow, maybe it's more programmatic, et cetera. And both models really are necessary. And ideally, you want to get to one platform that can address both that structured development as well as the highly dynamic. And one of the interesting feedbacks that we've had, or ideally a trend, is within the government is your ATO process, your authority to operate. Whereas in the legacy system, just the ATO process has been a long process in itself just to get the permission to go live. And so the desire, as I've spoken to some of the procurement agents that are out there and how they integrate with the ATOs and different systems that are purchased, and they're trying to address the same feedback that they get, is that if agencies instead are just doing pure COTS, traditional install, deploy, procure a whole bunch of hardware, which has a long process, a long risk profile, if instead they can have a platform that can address their needs, and then as they add new requirements to it, they just do builds inside of that. Those new products, those new solutions that they deploy are actually have the same security footprint, same security profile, maybe talking to the same systems, that they ultimately want to get to this mythical ATO in a day process. So it's more of a paper exercise because you're using the same tools, the same technology, the same security footprints that you just did the last time you did a go live. It's not a whole new environment that you're deploying. You've got something that can be flexible and take on new requirements. Then the next aspect is that even within that, as you start getting into some of those low-code situations with the citizen developers, is that really no app is a silo. And so we've had customers, and Sarah referenced that they've kind of peeled off different aspects of their environment as they moved it over to AWS, and they still have some stuff in the legacy system. We have customers today that are still on a mainframe, that they've spent 30-plus years on their business rules, that they're not even ready to try and peel off some of those aspects first. Maybe that's the right long-term path, but they're just trying to figure out how do I leverage what I've got and just extend my integration to it. Or I have a series of legacy applications that just don't work well with each other, but I want to modernize it. I want to make it mobile. I want to make it accessible from anywhere, and I want to address the security requirements that would require. And so as they do those things, they start looking at how do I have a solution set that can interface with my legacy. I don't have to throw out and abandon and start all new from a clean break DevOps. And we definitely have some customers that have done that, but others that are trying to leverage with the legacy and just extend it with DevOps for anything new, or extend it with a low-code or a hybrid between the two. And so we've focused on providing a platform that took all these things into consideration, as well as new things like Internet of Things, how I plug in social media and plug in multi-mode or omni-channel into that. What that ultimately looks at for us is our web methods platform. So I can do my development, I can do more of a visual forms approach in low code, a citizen developer approach, or I can do deeper coding, I can do APIs, I can do my services. How do I do my common orchestration, so how to develop my processes and tasks, and do my deep integration with my back-end systems. How do I make it omni-channel, so whether it's through the web, whether I'm doing it through mobile or email, triggered events, IoT, even social, so how do I respond to tweets even, is how do I factor those into my solution set, and if I'm doing that, how do I do my analytics? Not just how many resources am I consuming, but also understanding how my processes are working, what's working well, what's not working as well, and can I start doing predictive analytics against that? Because I have this common platform, I have visibility to everything that's happening inside of that, I can probably gain some insights real time so I can react to that. That way I'm supporting both that low-code, dynamic, highly differentiating type of solutions, as well as my standard, very structured, IT-driven, code-driven approaches to the environment. What that ultimately looks like then, is whether I'm going to the web and creating my applications, whether I'm doing some Java, whether I'm deploying it over the web or into mobile, is that I've got a single platform that brings all these together and bridges it in a way that can support the organization moving forward. And I want to do that in a way that supports modern architectures, including DevOps, microservices, APIs, as well as those low-code scenarios. Now, when we look at DevOps, we took kind of a components view, and you typically have your standard lifecycle, build, test, and run. But we look at applications, platform, and infrastructure, and how do we address each of these aspects. And what you see a lot of commonality is your test and run, you tend to have the same types of requirements, but in your build, you take much different approaches, versus a packaged application, like your SAP, your financial systems, your HR systems, versus a platform that you're developing to, the continuous integration, continuous development, out to your infrastructure side where I'm managing my hosts, my Docker environments, et cetera. But once you mature past that, you start getting into the same common types of requirements. Now, what we've done, as we took that, we built it out and looked at what are the categories of solutions that you would need to really be successful from a DevOps perspective, and then how do we make sure that our tool set, our platform, works cohesively with that. And so we've been able to extend and embrace a DevOps approach across each of these categories, so that we have customers who are able to do code the way they've done it in the past, so that they don't have to go through it and do a ton of retraining. So if they're already using, in our case, if they're already using web methods, how do I leverage that already to be able to start looking at DevOps and get past any learning curves or learning barriers to that? How do I do my automated testing? How do I do my deployment, et cetera? But we've also taken an approach that says that we aren't trying to be the single platform. So it's not a closed system, it's very much as an open system. And so we've been able to go through and embrace a lot of open standards and open source solutions that are out there, as well as other third-party products. We've had a lot of customers who've been using Jenkins, a ton of work that's been out there with Git and Jira. There's been a lot of interest in Docker, and so we've taken the whole platform and made sure that we are Docker compatible and have some recommended best practices around that. And that's alleviated a ton of deployment challenges that customers have had with environmental gaps and things that weren't identified in their testing, that maybe they're trying to do the continuous test and it works great, but when they deploy, it still doesn't, and the variance really wasn't the code, it's just the environmental factors. And so we've been able to approach that very consistently inside the platform, support a DevOps approach, as well as that low code. Now, the last thing I just wanted to touch on is we've talked about a lot in terms of the DevOps and looking at from just an applications perspective, but we really look at 5 overall building blocks as we look at our overall platform. We refer to our platform as our digital business platform. And that first block, first and foremost, is managing what do you want to do inside your environment. How do you manage your transformation? And so we've done a whole set of tools and processes for managing changes in the process and changes inside of your applications. how do you go through and categorize things into mode 1 and mode 2? And where are your areas of opportunity? Where are your areas of interdependency or higher risk and low risk? And what's the best bang for the buck? Where are you going to get the biggest results, and how fast can you go to that? And then beyond that, we've extended out into 4 blocks that go very well together. We've talked a lot today around process and integration and how those work together, but also how do you do it up to scale and moving it into memory, as well as being able to go through and process analytics and decisions. And then we've made sure that that whole platform is DevOps capable. We're very compatible from a Docker and deployment perspective, and that we are agnostic from where you deploy. So if you're deploying to on-premise, if that is still your model, that's great. Or if you're going pure cloud, we support that as well. And most customers ultimately are a hybrid, is that they have some sort of a legacy system. They have not moved it into private cloud, but they want to talk to that, but they want to deploy everything new out to the cloud, or they're taking advantage of other SaaS services, other cloud services that they want to integrate into their own cloud services, or they want to integrate into their on-premise legacy systems. Okay. And that closes out from my perspective, John.
Okay, thank you, Dustin. We do have some questions. So the first one is for you, Sarah. And the question is, how many members are on your technical team?
Ooh, that's just for verification? Around, let's see, give me a second to try to sort of add this up in my head. I mean, keep in mind that, verification program includes more than just the E-Verify and Save systems. We have a lot of other sort of attached systems that perform different functions. For example, we have a customer relationship management system that is used for our call centers. We have, analytics systems. We have all kinds of stuff like that. But how many contractors? Let's see. So at least 150-ish.
Okay.
That help?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. But for the DevOps, it's not that many. Like, each team has like one DevOps person, but our teams are about 12 people. And there's usually a DevOps lead that's on every contract that has, like, let's just call it 2 to 5 teams.
Okay. All right, excellent. Next question. How much has integration with legacy been a consideration with DevOps?
Massively.
Chris, massively? Okay, great.
Was that my question?
I was going to say, it's kind of open to the panel. So, go ahead, Sarah, and others chime in as you wish. No worries at all.
Yeah, so for us, like, it's a massive consideration because, like I said previously when I was talking, that, everything that we modernize and rip out from that legacy database has to be sort of refactored on the legacy side. So it's a massive consideration. We have the 2 teams working very closely together. In fact, we've even formed this super team. I'll call it a super team, where we've taken some contractors from the legacy team and some contractors from the modernized team, and we've created a new team that, is solving problems that the 2 teams are encountering while they rip out pieces, to ensure that, in essence, we're changing the wheels on the bus while it's in motion on the highway. So, things break when you rip out a piece. It might break a different process. So we have this super team now, which is made up of both vendors, which is kind of cool. I'll let someone else chime in there, though. Dustin?
Yeah, this is Dustin for us. Oh, let me continue. I was just going to say, for us, legacy is a consideration. Obviously, if you're buying off-the-shelf software, it's not ideal to integrate with legacy systems if you don't have to. So it's more from a data perspective is the primary aspect, and then if there's a process perspective, we'll see if there's a way that we can circumvent having to integrate that with the legacy system. Okay,
Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just extend that a little bit, is that integration for a lot of our customers has come back up, both in terms of just that breaking of the legacy and the refactoring, but also that they may have other systems that they rely on. We've dealt with some agencies that do some cross-agency work, where they want to modernize their pieces and move it forward, but other pieces that they are absolutely dependent upon are outside their control. And so they still need to manage the integration to the legacy, and it may never change. It definitely is not going to change on their time frame. And so how do I integrate into a variety of systems, whether it have been mainframe, whether I'm talking through APIs or databases, it's all varied. And then they've also been looking at how to integrate into the cloud. And there's different schools of thought. Do I do it in my own code and I just start calling those services directly? And some places have done that. But what they have found is they've run into some challenges as to how well do I manage what all web services that are out there, what all cloud services am I talking to, who's managed the credentials to that, what's the security model that we're using, do I have usage considerations? And so we've had one customer who had shared that they had some errant code that was interfacing, I don't know if it was Salesforce.com or one of the ones that was metered, where it kind of went crazy, right? And so they didn't have a way to throttle it because they were just doing direct integration point to point. And so they just get a bill, right? It doesn't say no, it just says, keep it coming my way. And so that integration aspect and how you connect all things, both legacy in as well as out, comes into play, right? So we've had to go through and address those needs or concerns too.
Okay, all right, great. Another question just came in, and this one is directed to Dustin, and the question is, how does use of open source comply with government security requirements?
So great question, because I was just talking to somebody about this last night. Since we're not developing, the majority of our stuff isn't from scratch, we're not applying open source, but for the one product that we did do that, you still have, whether you draw down the code and you're making it your own and combining it in your own application, you still have to go through all the internal security controls, NIST controls, et cetera, to get an ATO on that product. So even though it's open source, you're still kind of making it your own once you pull it down in your environment.
Okay. Chris, you mentioned several aspects around applications and processes. Curious, have your customers also pursued DevOps for microservices and APIs, things like that?
Oh, absolutely. It is actually one of the areas that they've gone much more on the code side versus the low code. And so when they start looking at their environments and they're trying to go through and do APIs and doing it from a microservices, one of the hindrances they start running into is how do I manage my environment with the number of microservices? When you start looking at the Netflix models of the world, there is a lot of developers that they use, a lot of processes they've already matured to manage those environments, and they've done it over a course of years. And so as the government agencies look to do that, what they have found is that it's a little bit easier if they kind of do like a hybrid approach to microservices where everything is not quite all autonomous, is that they do some clustering. And we've been able to provide some really good tools when we look at that overall digital business platform side to manage both the roadmap, the versioning, the planning to it, even ultimately how you package things up into light groups and manage that out through Docker. So it absolutely is I think just as strong from an integration standpoint when you start looking at the microservices side.
Can someone speak to what project management looks like with DevOps, or if it even exists?
I'll go first. This is Dustin.
Okay.
So I'll call it, we did a bunch of hybrid options with project management. If you're looking at something like infrastructure or moving a data center or something, I think you're going to have some hardcore project management, more kind of a waterfall approach than agile to that. What we found in implementing things for the first time or modernizing for the first time on the project I specified in the beginning, I didn't use a project manager. I was a project manager, but the way information was reported, you had three different types of information. You had to report to one set of groups in a waterfall fashion. You had to report to another in agile, and you had to report to another in a hybrid, just so people in the organization could feel comfortable that you're going to complete things. Now, as you move forward, I'd still challenge that most people say they're using Agile, but they'll also use terms, what's the next milestone, which really don't coincide, so you have to be careful there, that you are doing one of the methodologies or not. But yes, I don't think project management's dead. I just think you can do it in a more nimble fashion, less stringent when you're building a business application.
Okay. Anyone want to add on to that? Another question
I think project management is dead, and that, you know, it's really all about product owners working with the dev teams and having high-level impact mapping sessions with the leadership team. But, you know, I mean, you still have to consider the budget and ensure that you're spending money wisely and that your teams are giving you good value. But as long as you're focusing on value, I really think that most of the processes, the traditional project management processes, are dead.
Okay.
Agreed.
And then how long is the transition for customers to a DevOps approach?
So we took our legacy applications, which included the E-Verify and Save applications, the remaining pieces of it, and it took us around 6 months to, in essence, rewrite small pieces of the app and migrate it to AWS using a DevOps-like approach. It is not fully automated. We're continuing to work towards blue-green deployments for the legacy app, but it'll take us a little bit longer. That's if you're doing a legacy app. If you're going to do a modernized application, then it's immediate because you just build it using DevOps.
Okay.
That's my answer.
Automate
all of the architecture in other words, you automate the entire architecture as you're building the application itself. Everything is automated from the start.
Chris, go ahead.
So yeah, this is Chris. You know, I would echo that. You know, the feedback we have for our customers is that first one ends up obviously being the hard one. You know, I haven't spoken to anyone who did it in less than 6 months. But once they got over that hump and figured out the tools, got through the training, figured out where they had to adjust some contracts and how they're going to measure against those pieces. Once they had gotten through that the follow-on work is where they saw that benefit, that acceleration. And so, you know, it's a little bit of a push, you know, a little bit of a crawl, walk, run perspective, but then, you know, everyone's been very positive once they got through that first hump.
Okay. All right, great. Well, we have seen some outstanding information via the presentations. We've got some great follow-up questions as well. We have come to the end of today's webinar. I'd like to thank our speakers again for your presentations and your time today. I'd also like to thank our audience for attending and remind you again that in the next day or two, we will be emailing you a link to an archived version of today's webinar as it was recorded so that you can review it again or pass it along to a colleague if you'd like. So thank you again, everyone, and this concludes today's webinar.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.